The purpose of this tutorial is to learn the basics about CSS. For the sake of time, I'm going to use the documents that I created in the previous HTML tutorial to continue on with this tutorial. Cascading style sheets allow you to change the styles and layouts of your HTML. You can put your CSS directly in your HTML in your head section wrapped in style tags, or you can link an external file into your HTML. If you were to put it in your head, it would look like this. And all of your CSS styling would go between these two tags. I always link in an external file because it makes for much cleaner code. So here's an example of how to link in your style file. The first thing you'll have to do is create a new file and save it. I'm going to call mine style.css. And I've already logged into 900 DPI, and I'm going to save this in my HTML project. And I'm also going to create a new folder called CSS so that I can save all of my CSS files in the same place. So here I'm going to save style.css. And now I have a style sheet. In order to link in my style sheet, I have to add a link in my head tag. In the HTML tutorial, I mentioned that most elements have an opening and a closing tag. A link tag does not. A link is a self-contained element, which means that it would look like this. We're going to add rel equals style sheet, which defines that this link is a style sheet, and type is text/CSS. So it's a CSS style sheet. And then href equals, and this is going to be the path to our file. Our file path would be CSS, that's the name of the folder where I saved my style sheet, /style.css. And then I'm simply going to close the tag like that. So now that you've linked your style sheet, we're going to save our HTML file, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to target certain elements on your HTML page. So in order to target these elements, you need to give them a class or an ID. The difference between a class and an ID is that multiple elements can have the same class, but no two elements can have the same ID. Classes are useful when you are styling many things the same way. For example, if you have two divs that you want to have a blue background, you can give them both a class of bg-color. Let's try that. So I'm going to copy this div and paste it so that I have two divs. To define a class, you always have to put class equals and then the name of the class inside the opening element tag. So in this case, my class is going to be bg-color. And I'm going to give this same class to this div, class equals bg-color. Now I'm going to save this and go to my style sheet. I need to reference this class in my style sheet. A class always starts with a dot, and an ID always starts with a £. So to reference the class of bg-color, we would type .bg-color, there's our class, and an opening bracket. In Sublime, they automatically close the bracket for you. And then inside here are going to be all of the styles that we want to apply to any element that has this class. So we're going to include a property and a value that we want to use to style this element. In this case, it would be background-color :blue. You can see the syntax here. It's always property :value semicolon. In this case, you could also use a 6-digit hex code to be more specific about the shade of blue. For a full list of CSS properties, you can go to this link. So now I'm going to save my style sheet, and I'm going to see how that affected my divs. If I go to my 900 DPI website and click refresh, you'll see that those two divs with the class of bg-color turned blue. Now let's see how that works with an ID. An ID is unique to its element, so not more than one element can have the same ID. So let's give this div an ID of font color and save. So now I'm going to target just this div, and I'm going to make the color of my font white. Again, I go in here. Instead of doing a dot, I would do a pound sign since it's an ID, and I'm going to type font-color to target this ID. Same syntax, opening and closing brackets, except to target the font color and make it white, I'm going to say color: white and save. Notice that font color is not font-color like the background color, it is just color. So now let's see how that affected my div in this case. And you can see that the first div turned white while the second remained black. You can also compile CSS selectors. For instance, if you want to target the h1 tag inside the div with a class of bg-color, you can do the following. So I'm just going to get rid of this ID for the time being because we're targeting background-color. And if I want to target all of the h1 tags inside an element with bg-color, I'm going to write .bg-color space h1. The space h1 is what targets all of the h1 elements inside an element that has bg-color as the class. And then I'm going to do my same opening and closing brackets. And let's say we want to make the h1 yellow. So we would say color yellow and save. And now let's see how that affects our divs. You can notice that only the h1 tags in these divs with a class of bg-color turned yellow, while the p tags remained black. Just a quick note on naming classes and IDs. You can name the class and ID whatever you want. I named it bg-color, but you could name it anything. You could name it blue, you could name it div background. And you always want to make sure that when you're adding a class to an HTML element, you type class equals quotation marks and then the name of your class. Same for ID. Don't forget the quotation marks. And there you have it. The basics of CSS styling.